Yeah. Good morning, people.
So they tattle on themselves.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Use their own websites, copy. But use them for.
All right, John, can you see the presentation screen? Good? Yes, yes. All right. So I think we're good to go here. Sharing the screen. Got my mic on. It's recording. I've got my cross behind me instead of the waves, so they can see it online.
So, I really wanted to be here since you told me your whole lesson yesterday when you thought I wasn't going to be here.
This is true, but I love having you here for moral support. Good morning. Welcome. All right, so let's hide this window. All right, so we're taking a little bit of a detour in order to get back on topic. So, when am I preaching? Next week or the week after? Or the 23rd? 22nd. All right, so today I'm going to be starting just talking about Jewish weddings. What's the deal? Okay, we're going to be talking about contemporary, now modern type Jewish weddings. And we're going to talk about the original Jewish weddings, the way that they were basically set up in the Torah and the Talmud, which are the reference books for Jews. And next week, then, I'm going to be talking about the different parables that Jesus used that pointed to different concepts of the Jewish wedding. Then I'll be preaching about, I think, discipleship. I'm not sure. The following Sunday, and then the Sunday after that, which is the last Sunday in June, 22nd, so it'll be 29th. Then I'll be doing how the concept of Jewish weddings point to Revelation.
Next Sunday is Father's Day.
Okay.
That's not up.
Oh, I like it. I had to sign in so I could see it.
Oh my Lord.
It's awesome.
Get out of the way there. All right. Okay. So y'all can see it on the recording. All right. So Jewish weddings. Today, Jewish weddings really aren't that different than any other weddings. A lot of the civil ceremonies type of things have crept into the Jewish weddings. There are some Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox Jews that still will do it the old way. But just like everything else, it's kind of become watered down and contemporary. So they are rich in tradition, and they do draw on a lot of ancient tradition. And there's a lot of ancient customs, and it's just been adapted to modern times. Now, in all of the descriptions that I have found on contemporary Jewish weddings, it doesn't say anything about being religious or adhering to scripture or anything like that. It always is tradition, tradition, tradition. Fiddler on the Roof, tradition, tradition. It's all about keeping the tradition. Well, I guess the Jewish people get a pass, though, because what is their tradition? The things that were set up by God in the Old Testament. Okay, so a Jew saying they're holding on to tradition is more than just saying, well, this is the way we've always done it, which is usually our way of saying things. Don't change it now. This is the way we've always done it. That's the 7 words that kill churches.
It doesn't work.
Right. So when you think of a Jewish wedding, you may be in the category of everything I know about Jewish weddings I learned from Fiddler on the Roof. How many of y'all have even seen it? Okay, half of y'all. Okay, it is a must. It is a really, really good movie. The stage play, the music is fabulous. I did it again.
Fabulous.
Fabulous. It's fabulous. So, or because I said fabulous. Yeah. Or, they stomp on a glass, and that's pretty much all you know, or I don't know anything about it. So we're going to begin our June study by looking at the modern Jewish ceremony, and then next by looking at biblical foundations that Jesus pulled on in order to give certain parables and teachings. And then we're going to discuss how the traditional wedding ceremonies and their essential components shape a proper understanding of the Father, Jesus, the church, and Revelation. You got to know it in order to understand it. If you try to take a buffet approach to the Bible, you are not going to get a full course meal. You may get full, but it's not healthy. You got to have your meat and your starch and your vegetables in order to get everything. And dessert. All right. So by looking at the Father's relationship to the Son and the church, then it will give you a proper understanding of Revelation. So that's the ultimate goal, is for us to get to there. All right. So God said in Genesis 2, it is not good for man to be alone. If you remember, God created everything, created all of the animals, set man in place in order to tend the garden and to name everything. That was Adam's job, was to name every plant, animal, insect, everything. Can you just imagine the intellect of Adam?
He used more than 10% of his brain.
Yeah, he not only named it, but he remembered him. Okay, so that's amazing of itself. And the roots of Jewish weddings can be traced back to these ancient times. Understanding these foundations helps to appreciate the significance of the traditions that are still observed today. So in the Torah, it outlines various customs and laws that are related to the marriage, and it emphasizes the sanctity of the marriage covenant. And these ancient practices serves as the basis for the modern Jewish wedding ceremony. So we've got the marriage covenant itself, we've got ancient practices, and then we've got the modern Jewish weddings. Even though they are modern, you will still see elements of the ancient traditions interspersed in the wedding. Okay. So Jewish weddings are steeped in symbolism. They represent commitment. They represent joining of families, not just two people. And historical celebrations reflect the values and beliefs of the Jewish community throughout the ages. Throughout the Bible, various scriptures or various figures had notable weddings that exemplify the Jewish marital customs. And we pull off of these in order to have understanding. These stories provide insight into the values and the traditions that have influenced the modern practices. That's the next screen. Sorry. So there's several rituals that happen in the wedding that signify the couple's commitment to each other. And it's not like, okay, we're going to do this ritual right now, and then we do this. And then for the next part, we're going to do this ritual. It's woven in seamlessly. And unless you were looking for it, you really wouldn't know. You would just say, oh, that's cool. Oh, I saw this at that other wedding I went to. You don't really understand the significance, especially as Gentiles. So before the marriage, the bride and the groom sign the ketubah. And that shows that they are both willing to enter the marriage. It sets out the promises that the couple made to each other for a long and happy marriage. They sign it in front of the rabbi and witnesses who also sign the ketubah. So what would we call that?
Marriage certificate.
Marriage certificate
Yeah.
for us, okay? Marriage contract, because what do we do with that marriage license when it gets signed? It gets recorded.
Put it in the.
And it is a public document that is a binding contract. That's why it gets recorded. That's why it's witnessed, because it is a legal document. Okay.
Like that frame it, put it on the wall.
The ketubah is a legal binding document as well. So it is a vital document in Jewish weddings. It outlines the husband's responsibilities to his wife, and it symbolizes the couple's commitment, and it's often artistically designed. So you can see, like even in this case, that it's not just print. They also have some decoration in there, okay? Now I've got some other examples that I'll show you in a couple of slides. So the ketubah is a beautiful document, handwritten in Hebrew, and this one that you see here has a beautiful hand-cut paper design. So the ketubah is signed now, and now they're ready to start the ceremony. So the congregation's all waiting for the ceremony to begin. Jewish weddings usually take place on a Sunday. Why not Saturday? That's their Sabbath. That's a holy day. Okay. They're not allowed to be held on a Saturday because this is the Shabbat, or the holy day, Sabbath, right? So from Friday 6 p.m. to Saturday 6 p.m., that's God's time. So you're not allowed to do anything that would take away from God's time. The rabbi arrives to conduct the ceremony. So he's the religious leader. He's the teacher of the congregation, this gathering of people, the neighborhood church. So usually the ceremony is held in a synagogue, but this wedding that I've got pictures from are from an outdoor ceremony. All right, the chuppah. It's the wedding canopy. The chuppah represents the couple's new home together. It's symbolism. The ceremony takes place under the canopy, which symbolizes protection and sanctity. It creates an intimate space for the vows. So if you look, it is covered on top, but it's open on the front, back, and the sides. Some of them can be very, very simple, and it's just white linen on a frame. Others can be very ornate. So on the table is a bottle of wine and a glass. The rabbi blesses the wine, gives it to the bride and groom to drink. This is important. Yeah, one glass they share. It's a shared cup. And that's a symbol of their shared joy. Okay. Then there's another glass that's wrapped up in a napkin. And that's the one that the groom stomps on at the end of their ceremony, and he breaks. And one of the meanings in this is that there is no vessel that can hold all of the couple's love for each other. Okay. So why keep this wedding cup if it can't hold our love? So.
That's not something you would say to me in high school.
Oh. All right. So then the groom arrives, escorted by his parents. The bridesmaids and the groomsmen arrive. They'll stand with the best man at the front at either side of the chuppah. It's a long walk for the flower girl. Everyone awaits the arrival of the bride. The men all wear a kippah. It's a yarmulke in Yiddish. If you say, if it's modern churches or modern synagogues, they'll pass out yarmulkes to all of the men that come in. Okay, even if you're not Jewish, you have to wear the yarmulke. Okay, and it is a head covering worn as a sign of respect and to remind us that there is always something higher than ourselves. Okay, because it doesn't just sit lightly on there. They put it there and then they bobby pin it to your head. You feel it tugging all the time. So it's a constant reminder God's over us. Tape. They got to stick them on it.
Good.
All right, so everybody's wearing a yarmulke. So the bride then walks down the path with her mother and father on either side. So now you can see some of the contemporary stuff coming in. This is just like a regular, Christian wedding. So everybody comes in their order there. The parents then hand her over to the groom, who gives this woman to be married. Her mother and I do. Okay, so just like Gentile weddings, both sets of parents then stand on either side of the couple while the ceremony takes place. Okay, the parents are to have a part in this ceremony. When I did the wedding in June, was it May? Yeah, it's not just now June. When I did the wedding in May in Georgia, I did it that way. And the wedding planner was all befuzzled because I was changing it up. And so I wanted the groom's parents there along with the bride's parents. And not until I addressed everybody else, they went back to sit in their seats. So the wedding begins with a reading from the scriptures. Then the groom and the bride exchange rings. The rings are a symbol of marriage and the hope for an unbroken union. At the end of the ceremony, the groom then breaks the glass. Ceremony's over. The couple's now husband and wife. The congregation call out in Hebrew, Mazel Tov. Okay. And that just means good luck, congratulations. And then they go to the reception. And the reception, the only part of the reception that really is a necessary thing is a special dance that's called the hora. And that's when everybody's in circle and the husband and wife are presented. The wife dances a little bit, and then the husband gets carried in on a chair, and they go around the circle in the chair, and then everybody all dances together. And usually they're singing a particular song. Not Stacy. What is it? Does anybody know?
Huh?
You remember what it's called?
Oh,
Hava Nagila. Hava Nagila, Hava Nagila, Hava Nagila. So it's a traditional song that they do during the hora, which represents the circle of life. Okay, so that is a typical contemporary today Jewish wedding. Okay, so there are three distinct parts to the ancient Jewish wedding. You've got the shidduchin, which is a mutual commitment between families. We got the erusin, which is the engagement, and then we got the nisuin, which is the marriage itself. Okay, three distinct parts. Today, it kind of gets all mishmash, hodgepodge together, and it's not really three distinct events anymore. But in ancient times, it was, and it was often separated by months, if not years. Okay, a lot of planning goes into this. So the shidduchin is a time of mutual commitment. It refers to the preliminary arrangements prior to legal betrothal. In ancient times, the father of the groom often selected a bride for his son, as did Abraham for his son Isaac. And we can read about that in Genesis 24. Starting in verse 1, it says, Abraham was now very old, and the Lord had blessed him in every way. He said to the senior servant in his household, the one in charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh. I want you to swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I am living, but will go back to my country and my own relatives and get a wife for my son Isaac. Okay. No questions about the hand under the thigh thing? Yeah, they didn't have a Bible to put their hand on. So this was just a very personal request that involved a very personal touch. Okay. In ultra-Orthodox Judaism today, many marriages are still arranged by a marriage broker or matchmaker. Another thing from Fiddler on the Roof. There's a whole song about it. Matchmaker, matchmaker, make me a match. Find me a fine, catch me a catch. So it's a whole idea of a professional.
She did not look like that.
No, this is today. It's a show on Netflix, a series.
Yeah.
That's called Jewish Matchmaking. And it's a reality, it's actually a reality show. Okay. So it's considered an exalted and holy vocation to find and arrange a good marital match called a shidduch between a man and a woman. In ancient times, marriage was looked on as more of an alliance for reasons of survival or practicality. And the concept of romantic love remained a secondary issue, if considered at all. So romantic love grew over time. You put the couple together in order to make families stronger. And hopefully they'll just fall in love over time. That's what they were hoping. So, of course, the consent of the bride-to-be is an important consideration. In ancient times, we see this. Rebecca, for example, was asked if she agreed to go back with Abraham's servant to marry Abraham's son Isaac. And scripture tells us that she went willingly. Okay, so she wasn't kidnapped and forced into a marriage. Okay, even in ancient times, there were opportunities for the woman to say no. Okay, without getting in trouble. It's actually built in. In traditional Judaism and in most of the non-Jewish Eastern world, even today, it was a financial transaction between the families. Often it was made when the couple were small children. In some cultures, a dowry was paid by the bride's family. That's not a typo. The dowry is paid by the bride's family. Sometimes this accounted to, I will pay you to take this useless female off my hands. But mostly it was a realistic understanding that a healthy adult female was of more practical value to a good husband than to her birth family. In the Jewish culture, wives were highly valued, and money or goods flowed the other way. A bride price was paid by the groom's family to acquire a coveted prize for their son and to compensate her family for the loss of a valuable and beloved asset. Okay. You know that part in scripture, it's in all of my weddings. I say it several times. It's where the husband and the wife are to leave their mother and their father, and they are to cleave together because now they're one. This idea of leave and cleave, for the husband, it wasn't so much a cleave. For the wife, it was. Oftentimes, she would never see her family again. If it was a small village, then of course they would. But in the case of traveling to find somebody that's in your lineage, of your tribe, it could mean a lengthy journey. And then the wife comes back and never gets an opportunity to go back to her kinsman. Okay. So a Jewish man's marriage was usually arranged by his father in negotiation, called the shidduch, with the prospective bride's father. Again, in Fiddler on the Roof, you see that when the two gentlemen, the two fathers meet together in order to, they were Russian Jews. So they drank vodka until they were blind and then they loved each other. Okay. So sometimes the other family, including the subject children themselves, were included. Usually both fathers wanted nothing as much as the happiness of their children. After the exchange of a generous bride price, the families would cooperate, sometimes for years, in preparing the two young people for their eventual life together. So do you kind of see through this Mary and Joseph situation? Because they were put together when Mary was very young. We know that she was younger than 13 when they were betrothed. Now, we think that Joseph was quite a bit older just because of his absence 33 years later. Okay. But this betrothal for Mary and Joseph happened when she was very young. When the time came for the betrothal, so all the negotiations are done now. Okay. The two families would gather in the house of the bride's father. The groom would bring the ketubah, the ornate written marriage contract, and his father would bring a flask of wine. The father would pour a cup, hand it to his son. The son would then hold it out to the bride, saying, "By offering this cup, I vow that I'm willing to give my life for you." Then it was up to the bride. She could refuse the cup. Okay. And if so, the wedding agreement was canceled, the bride price was refunded. If she took the cup and drank, she was signifying that she in turn was willing to give her life for him. And so the betrothal is sealed. Once sealed, the two lived apart for a time, but were considered to be legally married. All right. Now think about the modern Jewish ceremony. Remember the rabbi? He came in with the ketubah and a bottle of wine. And then he would pour it into one cup and they would drink that one cup. So in today's ceremony, that's basically taking the betrothal period and mashing it up against the wedding so that it's right there. Okay. So they're betrothed for a matter of minutes today. And then they get married. Yeah. Yeah. Today's instant ceremony. All right. So they're considered legally married at the betrothal, and only a death or a legal divorce could dissolve the ketubah. So Mary and Joseph were legally married when she was a preteen, according to this. So when Mary was found to be with child, that was grounds for a divorce. So Joseph could legally divorce her at that point. So Joseph's thought to put her away privily, King James, simply meant that he planned to divorce her privately rather than to denounce her and shame her in public. So that was the whole idea until Gabriel came and said, "No, that's not what you're going to do." Say again?
Did adultery still carry a stone?
It did, yes.
So there was that possibility as well.
Yeah, if he brought her in public and said that she's pregnant and it's not mine. Yeah. So here's some ketubas for you to look at. These are ones that through different centuries, of course, you see just a plain one written there. That one's very, very old. And then some of these are 10th century. Some of them come up into the 17th century. And the very upper class Jews today will still commission an artist to put a ketubah together.
You can find it. 800.
One for you to just sign. And of course, these would be put on a wall
Yeah.
as art and a reminder. Okay, just like the menorah on their doorpost. They always see it when they go in, they kiss it, they touch it. Yeah, it's a mezuzah. Thank you. So traditionally, in preparation for the betrothal ceremony, the bride and the groom are separately immersed in water in a ritual called the mikvah, which is symbolic of spiritual cleansing. Stacy informed me that Jewish women they monthly go to the synagogue in order to be cleansed in the mikvah after their cycle. So preparations now. Betrothal has happened. Time is now going on. They're married legally, but not physically. Understand this. Building the bridal suite. A Jewish house was often a large compound built around a central courtyard. This image here is from a model that shows first century Jerusalem. So a part of it over on the side shows where the temple is and everything. So this is just an idea of how upper class Jews had their houses.
Each fence around, that would be one compound.
Compound,
That was one person's house, that's their son's house or whatever.
Right, right. So the housing compound, in Greek, it's called the insula, like insulated. Okay, insula was home to the patriarchal extended family. So this is the father's father's.
The oldest father, you moved to the front?
Yes.
I was wondering.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
You good enough.
So often it had several generations of sons in residence. The central living area was the quarters of the family patriarch and his wife. As each young man of the household was betrothed, he would simply build another room onto the house for his own family. Now, what's really cool is that as you travel through Mexico, the Caribbean, and South America, you see this same thing. You'll see a house that's built, usually cinder block, and over the years, it's usually been adobeed or painted at least. And after the first floor is built, you see all this rebar just sticking up in the air, waiting for the son to bring home a wife. And they will build a second floor.
People working, and then, yeah, it's really cool.
And they build their compound on a postage stamp piece of property.
Yeah, just keep going up.
They just keep on going up with cinder block and rebar
It's Caribbean, it's weird.
as the family grows. Yeah.
Never mind.
So it's not wind or straw or wood. All right. So each day between the betrothal and the marriage supper, the groom's father would inspect his progress on the dwelling. And eventually he, not his son, would set the date for the wedding. If you were to ask the toiling groom when his wedding was scheduled to occur, he wouldn't be able to tell you. He doesn't know. So all at the same time, he's still working his regular job, usually the family business. And they work all day in the family business, and then he comes home and works a little bit on his house, addition to the house. And then next morning gets up and goes back to work. And so this isn't a weekend project.
This is years.
This is months, if not years, in order to get done. Okay. Meanwhile, the bride would wait expectantly, always prepared for the groom's return, but not knowing on which day to expect him. Her attendants would stay with her each night for weeks or even months. And when the groom came with his own attendants to kidnap the bride and her attendants and take them from her home to his, he would arrive around midnight with no advance warning. It would be a major scandal if the bride or any of her attendants were caught unprepared.
Yes.
Be alert, be awake.
Yeah.
Now, those of y'all who know scriptures, parables, and other teachings of Jesus, this should already be ringing some bells. Okay. Now, coming back to another musical, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Yeah.
Okay. If you remember, the seven brothers went and kidnapped the girls right before a major snowstorm.
Yeah.
So that they couldn't get back home. And then they spent this time hoping that the girls would fall in love with them. Okay. And how did they justify it?
Scripture.
They used scripture in order to justify the kidnapping of these future brides.
They did.
All right. As soon as the procession reached the groom's home that night, the bride and the groom would retreat immediately to the privacy of their new quarters. The guests would wait expectantly while the groom's chief attendant stood outside the door and listened for the voice of the groom announcing consummation of the marriage. This would signal the beginning of the week-long marriage supper. Boy, talking about pressure. Okay, they just had a public ceremony. Now everybody leaves the public ceremony and they all go together to where the reception is going to be.
Wait.
And the husband and new wife then go to their room. And everybody is just waiting. They can't do anything else. They're not allowed to do anything else. And so they just wait while an attendant's at the door And then they're like, yes, it's done. Okay. These, 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 this idea continued even to the 1900s, not just in Jewish ceremony, but also in European ceremony. And it went one step further in order to prove the chastity of the bride. And somebody would have to go in and bring out the sheets in order to prove that everything was, that she was intact and the deed was done.
Also for a lot of girls, you sit in the bedroom. Now the beds would
Yeah.
have a veil, but that's still a little bit more pressure.
Yeah, I had a really difficult time finding a picture. So, I mean, I figure I could find an artist's rendering or something. I couldn't find anything. But now what Madison was talking about, I found several of those in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
They would have the paneled bedchamber,
Mhm.
4-poster bed with all of the curtains and everything. And there's basically a crowd outside the curtains, just waiting. So, so I hope I kept this PG. So, all right.
Years old with this old 30-year-old dude. So that's weird.
Oh, my house Solomon got 1,000 blood.
He did not.
You did too.
All right. So when the marriage was consummated, that would signal the beginnings of the week-long marriage supper.
So he takes her from her house, kidnaps her.
Right.
There is a ceremony.
Yep, that's with the canopy and everything.
Okay. That just makes it sound, look, he kidnapped her, took her to the
Mm-mm.
bedroom.
And the
Okay.
procession is like
Yeah.
both families.
And the whole village.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so this is a big deal.
Okay.
Okay. All right. The wedding supper, the nisuin, the third part of the marriage, this joyous but to us pretty uncomfortable custom of celebrating a consummated marriage is pigging out at a 7-day party.
You have to get extremely wealthy.
Okay. So this was exemplified in the gospel by the wedding feast of Cana, where Jesus turned water into wine, his first miracle, right? His first public miracle. No wonder they ran out of wine. It's a 7-day bender. Okay. They are partying, doing nothing else for 7 days. Okay. All right. Next time, we're going to take a look at Jesus's reference to these different events that happen in a wedding. So any questions about the wedding itself? Yes, sir.
That's part of, they break a bottle, but I'm looking in like,
Yeah.
Yeah. So when they're under the canopy,
oh, okay.
there is today, the way they do it today, the rabbi comes in with the ketubah, which is the marriage contract, and a bottle of wine. On the table is going to be a glass that they drink from together, but then there's another glass that's wrapped up really well in cloth. And after the wedding ceremony is over, that second glass is put on the ground and the groom stomps it.
Sections. And share a glass of wine between the two fathers and then there's.
So I don't know how that works in today's, but in ancient times, there was wine in different aspects of everything because it has to do with the symbolism and covenants and things like that. So we will be talking more about that next time.
Wine.
You know,
Shot of bourbon.
Many different kinds. The oldest brother was the one that gave my wife to me because her dad had already passed. And every time I turn around, he'd go, here, try this.
I thought you were going to give us some Nordic custom here. So
18, you know, he. Probably know. 18.
It's a one, what isn't it? What was milk he made of?
Yeah,
milk.
Milk,
very farmer.
dairy farmer.
Okay. And we had a Southern Baptist wedding, so it definitely was just tea.
And plus we were 18.
Yep.
So. Yeah. So I'm still confused about they pick her up at midnight
Yes,
and then they go to the ceremony right away at 1 o'clock in the morning,
Yep.
2 o'clock in the morning, and everybody's there.
yep.
Well, it says and the attendants, they have to gather the bridesmaids.
They're all,
They're
yeah.
all-
So the groom would usually come with his groomsmen. And then they go to the bride-to-be's house. Yeah,
Yes.
and then they pick up the rest of the
Everybody.
wedding party. And then the procession goes.
So the
From there.
groom's parent would have the cup, the hoopah, everything ready and done, and then she just shows up. That's opposite of our wedding.
It is, you had to do all the planning. I just showed up.
He did. Literally. He was changing his oil at 5
It's
o'clock in the
easier,
afternoon.
it's easier that way.
Yeah. All right, anything else?
So next time, you're gonna relate how this goes and how the marriage of the lamb goes back to.
No, that's the third one. Okay, so next
How it
time,
relates to the Old Testament.
next time I'm going to be setting that up by talking about how Jesus referred to the events of a wedding in his teachings. Okay, so it'll be Jesus's view.
So do you think that where he did his first miracle, public miracle, was that someone related to him? Because his mom was all freaking out.
They think it was James.
They think it was James, his brother's
Yeah.
wedding. Hey,
Yeah, it doesn't specifically say, but because of the events and who was there,
right.
they think it was James.
Because why would his mother be saying, do something? Because, yeah. Okay, just wondering.
I also wanted to challenge one thing, the tradition that Mary was 12 or 13
Mhm.
didn't come up until the 3rd century. When the church declared that it was legal to get betrothed at 12 or 13, kind of convenient.
She said she was a child.
Because so there's 3 different words that are used in Greek. Quickly, there's young woman, there is young girl, and there's woman. Young girl is used for a 12-year-old when she resurrects a 12-year-old girl. Mary's called woman. Blessed are you among women. So there's 3 different ages, and unless young girl is 13 and
So it has to do in Jewish tradition where the bat mitzvah occurs.
but she, again, there's 3 different words used for different ages of women. Youngest is used to refer to a 12-year-old girl, and she's referred to as the oldest. So I'm just gonna.
It's my understanding that she hadn't had her bat mitzvah yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons for different traditions, but it's also, there's reasons to believe that that's not the case either. Now, we can delve deeper into that, but.
I don't think enough information's there to really say.
Right, so if there's not enough information there to really say, then we probably shouldn't say she's 12 either.
Well, then we wouldn't say anything, would we?
Except that she's called a woman.
Later,
Actually, yeah, 12, 13, 14, there's a woman, you're technically a woman.
Well, yeah, but that young, if 12-year-old girl is young girl, then there'd also be that term young woman. And then there's a term. Right, well, Luke is the same author for this, right? We're talking about Luke calls her woman. Luke also calls a 12-year-old girl a young girl. And Luke also has another term that's young woman. This is something that's really important to me because I, especially online, I get in trouble for a lot. I get into a lot of defense against Islamists. And they're gonna say, well, how can you say that you're so much better? Your God impregnated a 12-year-old girl. Maybe my prophet mounted a 9-year-old, but your God mounted a 12-year-old. How can you say that you're so much better? It's like, well, it's not scripture. That wasn't a tradition until the 3rd century. It wasn't codified by any of the early church fathers. Early church fathers hardly talked about marriage at all. And it wasn't until at the same time, the same group that said it's okay to get betrothed at 12 years old. That became the legal church law.
yeah, they could have been betrothed even earlier than that, depending on the families.
Yes, but that is what it became church law in the 3rd century. That became church law that included get betrothed as early as 12 because people were demanding from the church in the last later part of the 3rd century. We need to have a age by which we can get betrothed.